All right, we're going to do a quick live chat here. So if you have any questions, throw them into the comment section here, and I'll try to answer them. I am going to post this and give people a minute or two to join. So give me 1 second. All right, I'm going to post this. If you guys want to post it too, tell your friends to come and yell at me, and I will yell back at them. Okay. So you may have seen this morning that Politico posted a piece that was highlighting some daylight that has emerged between kind of AOC and Bernie Sanders. I don't think that's exactly the right frame for it, and I'll get into that more. There are a bunch of questions that people had about it, but let me start by saying I think it is a fair observation to make that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, compared to what she was calling for in 2018, is behaving slightly differently. As the Politico article points out, in 2018, one of the first things she talked about after winning her primary was, let's go get my sister elected in St. Louis, Missouri, running against Lacey Clay, and she went out and literally campaigned for her. She was still at that point a challenger. She had not been elected as a member of Congress. After she came to Congress, she continued getting in public fights with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She even went so far as to occupy Pelosi's office in the beginning of the term, which helped kind of galvanize international attention around the idea of a Green New Deal. I think people forget about how impactful that decision was, and it was not something that was risk-free. Participating in an occupation of your party leader's office could have had all sorts of implications and consequences for her down the road. Now, since then, as the article points out, she was late endorsing Jessica Cisneros against Henry Cuellar. Emily's List even endorsed Cisneros before AOC did. She has endorsed Marie Newman, but those are the only two challengers so far that she's endorsed against incumbents. There are a lot of others that are running. You've got Morgan Harper running against Joyce Beatty in Columbus, Ohio, which she has stayed away from. Cori Bush is running again against Lacey Clay. She hasn't endorsed in that race. Now, a spokesperson in the article said, we don't usually endorse that far ahead. That wasn't the case in 2018. Okay, but let's talk about the frame of the kind of daylight between Sanders and AOC. So I think a problem that AOC has in finding a model for how to operate in Washington is that there are kind of two caricatures. One is there's the kind of outsider, going to burn it all down, screw the establishment type of person. And then there's the we're going to work within the system kind of person. A lot of people hold up Bernie Sanders as the kind of outsider who's going to take on the establishment. And that fits with the rhetoric that he uses about the Democratic establishment. And the biggest piece of evidence that people tend to give is A, he's not an actual Democrat, and B, he took on the party establishment in the 2016 presidential campaign. But if those are the only things you pay attention to, you'd have a confused understanding of who Sanders is. AOC has actually taken on her party leader, Nancy Pelosi, publicly a lot more than Bernie Sanders has ever taken on his party leadership. In fact, in recent years, Bernie Sanders was even made a member of Senate Democratic leadership. You could go back through all of his about the Democratic establishment, about millionaires and billionaires. You're not going to find a named fight with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, for instance, or in the past with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. He was critical here and there of President Obama, but in general, he went on the Senate floor, took a flamethrower to everybody on behalf of workers and the unemployed, But what he was also doing was taking a flamethrower on behalf of the Senate leadership's bill, a bill that fell short in all sorts of ways, and also included this $500 billion slush fund for corporate America. That was Bernie Sanders being good on politics, its own agenda. So, in a way, there's the burn it down kind of outsider, take no prisoners. Yet the person who's held up as the model for that, it doesn't do it himself. If Bernie Sanders was a take no prisoners, burn it all down type who was, effectively supplanting the party leadership with his own movement, then that would be one thing. But that isn't what Bernie Sanders does. So you can't necessarily ask Ocasio-Cortez to walk that same path if Sanders himself isn't walking that path. There are a lot of reasons that kind of Sanders' rhetoric and his career kind of allow him to appear that he's more radical than he actually is, that we don't need to get into, and that she can't replicate in just a year or two. But I do think that the criticism / observation in the piece is real. Like something real is going on here. It is true that several of her more radical staffers have left her office. It is true that she is trying to make more friends with the party leadership than she was particularly early on, than she was when she was running against party leadership in 2018. So let's see if I can find some of the questions that are coming in here. And I haven't done one of these without Eric, who's now in Australia, as you guys know, Eric Byler. So I'm going to try to do it on my own and find some of these questions. All right. Okay, I see them now. Are both AOC and Bernie diverging from the left base? Okay, so let's take out of it the question of what the actual left base is. But I think that's fair to say. I think there is a left-wing element that would have liked to see a tougher fight against this bailout that was recently passed, that would have pressured Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to use the leverage that they had to extract a better deal, and one that didn't threaten to kind of restructure the economy in a pro-corporate direction. Bernie Sanders didn't do that. Ended up going along in the end. AOC was far more vocal in her criticism of it. Ended up voting for it in the end. I think you could make the case that yes, what this questioner is asking is in fact happening. Let's see if Keith Ellison was DNC. This is from Adrian PN. If Keith Ellison was DNC chair instead of Tom Perez, how different would primaries be? What changes would there be? So that is an excellent question. So Tom Perez, edged out Keith Ellison just barely to be DNC chair. Ellison became vice chair. He then ran for Attorney General of Minnesota and resigned in order to take the position of Attorney General. Ellison, of course, was one of the few people to endorse Bernie Sanders in the 2016 campaign. Sanders endorsed Ellison immediately for his bid for DNC chair. I think there would have been a smoother process around the debates. The approach that the DNC took under Perez to saying at first, if you have 60,000 signatures, if you have 60,000 donors, you can be on the stage, was kind of a hackneyed attempt to understand small donors and a grassroots campaign, rather than a genuine understanding of what a grassroots campaign is. Because what was predictable is that consultants who are good at using Facebook at acquiring small dollar donations were going to rake in an extraordinary amount of money. And so people like Cory Booker they were quite able to get 60,000 donors. They just had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on Facebook acquiring those donors. So it didn't really show that there was some explosion of grassroots support. I do hope, and I'll ask Ellison this. I wonder if he'll answer it on the record. I do hope that he would have postponed in-person primaries this cycle once the coronavirus pandemic became the apparent public health crisis that it was. That I think that the thing that will live around Tom Perez's neck for the rest of his life is that he didn't speak out. Now he will say, "Look, it's not up to the DNC. The states run these elections, but the DNC is entirely capable of making its own public statements and urging states to postpone primaries, and is able to put out statements telling voters that it's not safe to congregate in polling places, and they're able to talk to their candidates and urge them to do the same. They did none of that. People's lives were put at risk as a result in elections in mid-March, and we just saw that we know now of two poll workers in Florida that tested positive for COVID-19. That's hundreds of people potentially put at risk who were at those polling locations, and on and on. So the DNC chair is not as powerful as people tend to think. So the difference might not be that might not be that huge, but I think certainly things would be going better. And particularly bearing in mind that the DNC is completely in debt. They have kind of eschewed the grassroots, we're not going to take corporate money approach, yet they haven't raised a lot of big money either. So it's kind of a failure of both strategy, ideology, and competence. I got time for maybe one or two more. Why AOC is going through the culture war side, not economic populism. I don't think that's entirely accurate. I think AOC always tries to link what you would call culture war issues to economic issues as well. If people disagree, let me know. But I don't think that's exactly accurate. Questions without a question mark, which is not helpful. Let me find one more good one here. So Michael Mancini says, saw this on Twitter and I still want to support AOC. We just need to keep a careful eye on her, like we should be watching all of our politicians. I think that's a great point that Michael's making here. That too often everybody who follows politics gets into a type of hero worship or what AOC actually recently called savior politics. That always hunting for the next savior. Now, the type of political system we have where individuals rather than parliamentary coalitions are on the ballot requires us to have people on the ballot that people have faith in, vote for, and get behind. So some of that is, you can't disentangle from our current politics, but every politician needs to be pushed. A politician, whether that's Bernie Sanders, AOC, Marco Rubio, you name it, doesn't have as much power by themselves as you think. They're going to push things as far as they see fit, sometimes in their own interest, sometimes in the interest of an ideology or a public cause that they champion. But they need people pushing the whole time. The more people push, the further that a politician is able to go. The more you organize, the more room they have to run. There's a famous, probably apocryphal, I've never been able to prove that it happened, quote from FDR, and I'll wrap up with this, during the New Deal, where he was meeting with I think it was civil rights leaders, and it may have been about desegregation in the military. I can't quite remember, and if it's apocryphal, it doesn't matter. He told them, look, I agree with you, and I believe in what you're saying. Now make me go do it. And so whether or not somebody is saying that or not, that's how voters and organizers should behave. Don't hope that a politician agrees with you. Don't wonder what's in their heart. Who cares? Just make them do the right thing. All right, and I'm going to try to do a few more of these since everybody's stuck at home in this Corona shutdown. But thank you guys for joining me on this one. And let me see if I can actually figure out how to end this.